Tonight, judges and lawyers absent as courts reopen in the country following the suspension of a 2-month-old strike by the Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria. Chief of Army Staff Major General Farouk Yahya affirms renewed synergy among security agencies in tackling insurgency as he is screened by the House of Representatives. World Bank projects the country's inflation rate to become 5th highest in sub-Saharan Africa by the end of this year, says 7 million more Nigerians may plunge into poverty by end of 2021. And US COVID-19 death toll surpasses 600,000 according to data from Johns Hopkins University. Plus, business sports news from Abuja and later, international news from our studio in London.
On business news tonight, private sector players seek strategic policies in fast-tracking Nigeria's economic revival.
On sports news tonight, Cristiano Ronaldo becomes all-time top scorer in the history of the European Championship with a brace in Portugal's victory over Hungary.
And from Abuja, the president virtually flags off the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas Train 7 in Benue River State, challenges stakeholders on timely delivery of the project.
After 2 months, nationwide strike, courts across the country reopened today, signaling an end to the agitation for financial autonomy for the judiciary, but with expectations that the demands of the workers will be met. And despite the directive for work to begin, most of the courtrooms visited by our correspondent in the Federal Capital Territory were empty, while judges and lawyers were also absent in their courtrooms. The strike was suspended on Wednesday, June the 9th, following a meeting between officials of the union and the National Judicial Council, led by the Chief Justice of Nigeria.
The Federal High Court in Abuja comes alive after the Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria suspended their 2-month strike. Security guards are seen on duty, but the scene in the courtrooms are different. The courts are empty except for some court officials. At the Federal Capital Territory High Court, the story is the same. For lawyers, steps should be taken to forestall any recurrence.
Those who have constitutional duties and obligations must ensure that they comply with the provisions of Section 121 or 120-something of the Constitution by releasing to the heads of courts on a pro rata basis the money meant for the heads of courts. For the head of courts also to be accountable and avoid doing acts that will be inconsistent with the demand for judicial autonomy.
The major challenge for lawyers is how to clear the backlog of cases ahead of the annual vacation, which is about a month away.
Their lordships should think deeply and see whether or not the judicial vacation of this year, as part of the sacrifices they will make for the speedy disposal of backlog cases, this strike period, which was also like a resting period for them, should be taken as or be deemed to be part of their annual vacation for this year, so that the justice system will not suffer more epileptic delivery justice system. So we should go into full-scale hearing of cases. Judgments that are pending should be delivered.
Depending when they have their meeting and they might decide that, okay, we've slept too much, there's been so much of a backlog, we can forgo the vacation, or they might decide, okay, after vacation we can resume. So it's left for the judge to do case management and know how to balance it out and try to catch up with what they've missed for the past 2 months.
The Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria suspended its 64-day-old strike action. They have given the government 3 months to implement its terms.
Meanwhile, the situation is quite different in the commercial city of Lagos, where at least 3 judges of the Lagos State High Court Ikeja sat to hear proceedings. Court staff, lawyers and litigants arrived at the court some as early as 8 a.m. Most of the courtrooms were open, with parties seen moving in and out. Hearings could, however, not fully commence in earnest, as most of the cause lists were yet to be updated. The date for hearing had been overtaken by the strike, and even though our cameras could not go into the courtrooms, we observed that many lawyers were liaising with court officials with a view to getting new hearing dates for their matters. The cause list at the Court of Justice Mojisola Dada was, however, up to date, and she sat to hear some matters while a few other courts also opened. Activities were low-key at the Federal High Court in Ikoyi, with only 1 judge sitting. Well, staying with legal matters, the Court of Appeal sitting in Akure, the Ondo State capital, will tomorrow sit on the case filed by the PDP candidate in the October 10, 2020 governorship election, Itayo Jegede, challenging the victory of the APC candidate, Governor Rotimi Akeredolu. The court will decide whether the case was a pre-election matter or not. The 3-man panel of judges, led by Justice Teresa Oji Abadua, had fixed Wednesday, June 16th for ruling. The lead counsel to the PDP candidate, Onyeachi Ikpeazu SAN, had earlier approached the appeal court claiming that the APC candidate's nomination was not constitutional. The election petition tribunal, led by Justice Umar Abubakar, that sat on the case on April the 20th, 2021, had ruled that the qualification of the APC candidate and his deputy were not a pre-election matter, but a constitutional one, which is not within its jurisdiction. Subsequently, counsel to Mr. Jegede, not satisfied with the tribunal judgment, approached the Court of Appeal, insisting that the case was not a pre-election matter. Moving on to other stories, the newly appointed Chief of Army Staff obviously has a big task ahead of him. First, to effectively secure the country's territorial integrity, and then to ensure an end to insecurity in the land. But he is seeking the cooperation of everyone to achieve this, as he reassures the Joint Committee of the House of Representatives on Army and Defense that, contrary to public perception, there is synergy among security agencies in the country to tackle insurgency, especially since the emergence of the new service chiefs. He made these comments today before the closed-door screening session for the confirmation of his appointment as Chief of Army Staff, a request which the President sought from the lawmakers last week.
Judging from my experience, it's not one-man job, but it's what could be done or must be done along with others, other services, other agencies, including all stakeholders. Indeed, Operation Hard and Care, before I left, has garnered this as a cornerstone for achievement of its mandate. We have always operated together. That's why you see the composition of Army, Navy, Air Force there. And now including the police, DSS, civil defense, and all other stakeholders. And as we know, internal security is really intelligence-driven operation. So we need others, including communities, including people, including opinion leaders, including traditional rulers, and all others who can provide information, because the enemy hides within us. So it is they who should provide information, who should support this war. All the service chiefs now, luckily we have all met in the academy. So there is no much gap or something we don't know.
And there are more successes being recorded by security forces in the country. The latest is by operatives of the 72 Special Forces Brigade of the Nigerian Army, who apprehended 73 men in Makurdi, the Benue State capital, on their way to Imo State last night. The Army says it acted on intelligence reports to intercept the young men, who were said to be conveying 47 motorcycles as well as some minerals like lead and zinc, all loaded in 5 trucks. Briefing journalists, the Benue State Deputy Governor, Mr. Benson Abonu, confirmed that no weapons were found on the suspects, who claimed they were heading to Imo State to work as motorcycle operators.
They were coming from Nasarawa State and heading for Imo State. Imo State of all places. Imo State, where we are having a lot of conflict at the moment. And they are here with all their motorcycles. And I asked them what they were going to do in Imo State. And they said they were going to do Okada riding. And I asked them if they were not aware of challenges, security challenges on ground in Imo State at the moment. And they said they were aware. So I honestly don't know why they are heading for that place with their motorcycles. If you take a look at the trucks here, they are all loaded with lead and zinc, which is a solid mineral that was mined in Plateau State. And they are actually being dispatched to a company in Port Harcourt. But the trucks on their own loaded these young men somewhere along the route. I called the manager of the mining company in Plateau State, and he acknowledged the fact that he sent these items to Port Harcourt and warned the drivers not to pick anybody on the road. But of course the drivers are here and they picked these young men. I think the good news is that not one single weapon has been found.
In the meantime, the governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, has taken a swipe at the presidency over the issue of insecurity. He insists that the success or failure of national security falls on the shoulders of the Commander-in-Chief, President Muhammadu Buhari, and not on the subnationals who have no control over the security apparatus. Governor Wike made the statement at the commissioning of the 21-kilometer Odufo-Umoye Road in Eche local government area of the state, with the former Senate President David Mark as special guest.
It's the commissioning of a 21-kilometer road in a Eche local government area of Rivers State, constructed for the first time in the history of the benefiting communities. The people's excitement is a testament of their level of appreciation to the man referred to as Mr. Project. For Governor Nyesom Wike, besides speaking about the project, he insists the success or failure of national security falls on the shoulders of the Commander-in-Chief, President Muhammadu Buhari, and not subnational leadership, who have no control over the security apparatus.
The President said, go home and solve your problem. Go home and solve your security problem. But let me also tell Mr. President too, yes, he has said the security issues is left in the state. How about our president? Not be so. The Constitution didn't say that. Who is the commander-in-chief? Are we the governor or commander-in-chief? We are not commander-in-chief. Mr. President, you are the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. You appoint IG. You appoint Chief of Army Staff. You appoint Chief of Naval Staff. You appoint Director D. Which one do we appoint? CP, I don't appoint. Director here, no be me. Commander here, no be me. Which one again you say they are under me? They are not under me. You are the one controlling. Okay, allow us now to pick who will be CP for ourselves. Allow us to pick who will be in charge of SSF. Then you will see whether it will be the same thing. So I invite the Excellency to please speak for
Before commissioning the road, the former President of the Senate, David Mark, commends Governor Wike for justifying the confidence reposed on him by the people.
In Rivers State, unfortunately, those who are in opposition are so weak that they have nothing to say against your governor. That's why you can walk tall, and that's why you can jump into your car and go anywhere, because you've shown them love. You brought democracy to the people. PDP as a party is happy to have you. You are one of the pillars of our great party.
He then commissions the project. The 21-kilometer Odufo-Umoye Road, which links Eche to part of Imo State, will in no small measure accelerate economic growth in this part of Rivers State.
In part two, after the break, we take a further look at the NBS inflation figures plus the World Bank report on Nigeria's inflation. We have the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Muda Yusuf, to examine this. Please stay with us. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Judges and lawyers absent as courts reopen in the country following the suspension of two-month-old strike by the Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria. Chief of Army Staff Major General Farouk Yahya affirms renewed synergy among security agencies in tackling insurgency as he is screened by the House of Representatives. World Bank projects the country's inflation rate to become fifth highest in sub-Saharan Africa by the end of this year, says 7 million more Nigerians plunged into poverty in 2020 alone. And US COVID-19 death toll surpasses 600,000 according to data from Johns Hopkins University. A new World Bank report on Nigeria's development for June is projecting that 7 million more Nigerians may likely become poor. This is entering into 2020. The bank says Nigeria's inflation rate is also expected to emerge the fifth highest in sub-Saharan Africa by the end of 2021. Meanwhile, the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, Dr. Kaide Fahimi, is calling for the total removal of subsidy for petroleum motor spirit, otherwise known as petrol. Our correspondent, Emperor Simon, reports.
It's another edition in the series of Nigeria's development update, this time covering the first 6 months of 2021. According to the World Bank's country director for Nigeria, the report is a bitter pill to swallow, but the reality of Nigeria's economic progress.
Nigeria is at a critical juncture. Nigeria has so much potential, but that potential has not been realized, and with the COVID crisis, the pressures on the economy, the pressures on society.
The country's inflation rate is expected to exceed 16% in 2021, and at least 11 million jobs are also projected to be lost, a situation that's been worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic, insecurity and global fall in price of oil.
The falling in purchasing prices has resulted in an increase of 7 million more Nigerians in extreme poverty. So then, as a result, there's no surprise that if we have lower per capita incomes, less purchasing power because of higher inflation, we have few job opportunities, there's no surprise that we're going to see higher insecurity and conflict.
After the presentation, it's time to evaluate the report, and panelists, including chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum, give their views.
Nigerians must see that change in our lifestyle. If we want PMS to go, then many of us have to reduce our convoys to 3-4 vehicles. Those are the kind of practical steps that we must take in order to address some of these issues that the World Bank is highlighting.
Nigeria, for me, is not a rich country. Nigeria is a poor country. You have seen the revenue streams that have been shown, the projections, the way they are coming, and then when you compare them with the expenditure. And that is why a number of reforms are being put in place.
The 76-page report tagged Resilience Through Reforms also highlights Nigeria's progress in the area of electricity supply, tax reform and other critical factors of economic growth.
Despite the horrific statistics, the belief is that Nigeria can still come out of the wood by ensuring that revenue generation is increased, and that also means looking at the agriculture sector. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
On the other hand, Nigeria's headline inflation seems to be slowing down after reaching a 20-month high, as latest data from the National Bureau of Statistics shows that the Consumer Price Index moderated for the second consecutive month to 17.93% in May from 18.12% in April. Food, urban and rural inflation also declined in the month under review, except for core index, which rose to 13.15% in May from 12.74% in April. According to the NBS, inflation accelerated in Kogi, Bauchi and Sokoto states, while Katsina, Imo and Delta states recorded the lowest rate. Kogi, Kwara and Enugu had the highest food inflation rate, while rates eased off in Akwa Ibom, Bauchi and the Federal Capital Territory. Well, let's get another perspective to the inflation story. We're now being joined on the news at 10 by the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Welcome to the news at 10.
Thank you very much and good evening.
Good evening. Now, what's your reaction to the World Bank's report that Nigeria's inflation rate may rise to 5th highest in sub-Saharan Africa by the end of this year?
Well, that will happen if we do not do the right things, because we need to put this within the context of the key drivers of inflation in the Nigerian economy. And some of the key drivers that we should be looking at are issues of, for instance, of transportation costs, issues of energy costs. Because of diesel, as I speak to you, is between 270 to 280 naira per liter. And all the trucks that move goods across the country, food items, almost 90% of them are running on diesel. Many factories, especially the SMEs and even the medium and large ones, are also running on diesel. This is now between 270 to 280 naira per liter. All of these costs will have to be transferred to the final consumer. Then we have the issues of the exchange rate depreciation. Many transactions in the economy today are being based on an exchange rate of about 500 naira to the dollar. And you know, many factories imported raw materials and goods and all of that. All of these have very serious implications for inflation. Then we have the issues of security. We know what the security situation has done to the agricultural sector. Many of the farmers are now in IDP camps. That is affecting agricultural output. And if you look at the basket of inflation, food inflation is the most troubling of all. And when we talk about poverty, one of the major causes of poverty is people not being able to afford basic things like food. Some of the food prices have gone between 50 to 100% in the last 1 or 2 years. I'm talking of staple foods, like gari, like rice, like maize, like yam, and all of that.
All right. One moment, Dr. Yusuf. Because if you put that side by side, talking about the forecast of the World Bank, with the NBS's May inflation report, a slowdown for the second consecutive month, how significant is this? And, you know, does it really tally with the situation you're painting that is on ground in Nigeria at the moment?
Well, it tallies. It tallies because if you're able to address this, then the prediction of the World Bank may not materialize. Now, the reduction that we have seen are actually not quite significant. We saw a deceleration in the headline inflation of 0.19%. We saw a deceleration in food inflation of 1.05%. We saw an acceleration in core inflation of 0.41%. So we are not dealing with adjustments or movements that are material. What is important is that at this level, with this situation, consumer purchasing power, citizens purchasing power, cost of production, profit margins, all of these things will be adversely affected. And this has implications for economic growth, it has implications for investment, it has a very serious implication for the welfare of the people. So these are very fundamental issues that we need to deal with when we are talking about creating an economy that is socially stable and that is inclusive. Because when we talk about the welfare of the people, the capacity to afford basic things are very critical.
Let me jump in again, Dr. Yusuf, beg your pardon. And this is, I mean, when you have this report, 7 million people been pushed into poverty, 2020 alone, and then you hear from the president, his comments that to lift 100 million people out of poverty, that is in progress. And so far, about 10.5 have been lifted out of poverty in the last 2 years.
You see, when people make this pronouncement, when you have this kind of pronouncements, what we need to do is to interrogate the parameters, the methodology for arriving at this kind of decisions or this kind of pronouncement that has been made. We need to know what the president means when he said over 10 million people have been lifted out of poverty. We need to interrogate the methodology to know whether those who have actually been lifted out of poverty, according to him, is a sustainable thing. We also need to interrogate what methodology World Bank has used. So from an academic or research point of view, it is when you interrogate or you examine this methodology, that is when you'll be able to pass your judgment one way or the other, to be able to validate whether the president is right or whether the World Bank is right. That kind of examination from an academic and research point of view.
We appreciate your time. Thank you so much, the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Thank you for joining us on the News at 10 tonight.
Thank you very much, my friend.
The World Health Organization is raising concern about a possible third wave of COVID-19 in Africa as the number of cases in the last 2 weeks rise by 53%. The WHO country representative, Mr. Walter Mulombo, says the number of cases on the continent will soon cross the 5 million mark. Meanwhile, the federal government says citizens who have not received their first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine can now go to vaccination centers and get vaccinated, as the country expects another 3.92 million doses by mid-August.
Officials of the World Health Organization, WHO, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, and the Federal Ministry of Health are in this hall to give an update on the COVID-19 vaccination exercise in Nigeria. Nigeria began administering the second dose of AstraZeneca vaccine 2 weeks ago. But vaccine hesitancy is a major problem that the government is grappling with, as only about 680,000 citizens have been fully vaccinated against the virus.
We have been inundated with requests by Nigerians to be vaccinated. In response to this, we have decided to reopen vaccination for the first dose from today. This means anyone 18 years and above who has not been vaccinated should visit the nearest vaccination site for the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. For such persons, their second dose will be due in 12 weeks, and by then we will have received the next consignment of vaccines. We now have information that Nigeria will get 3.92 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine by the end of July or early August.
Although death toll from the pandemic remained relatively low in Africa, the recent increase in the number of cases in the last 2 weeks is now raising some concern as the WHO warns of a possible third wave in the continent.
In the last 2 weeks, Africa recorded a 53% increase in cases compared to the previous fortnight. There are, however, 5 countries currently experiencing a resurgence that are fueling these numbers. Concerns around the Delta variant of COVID-19 virus, as stated by the Executive Director, and the need to continue to look out and track variants of interest. The threat of a third wave of COVID-19 is real and is rising in the African region, including Nigeria.
There are currently over 167,000 cases of COVID-19 in Nigeria, which has resulted in 2,117 fatalities.
When the News at 10 returns, the President virtually flags off the Nigeria liquefied natural gas Train 7 in Benue River State. Plus, private sector players seek strategic policies in fast-tracking the country's economic revival. That's on Business News. Do join us again. Let's head over to our Abuja studios where Gloria Mizoke is standing by with more stories. Hello, Gloria.
Hello, Millicent. Good to see you. The President has emphasized the need for countries in the West African sub-region and those in the Sahel affected by the security challenges to team up with to confront the menace President Muhammadu Buhari made the comments today when he received the new special representative of the UN Secretary-General for West Africa and the Sahel, Mr. Mohamed Saleh Anadef, a Chadian. President Buhari described the problems in the Sahel as enormous, noting that Boko Haram has exerted heavy toll in terms of lives and resources in Nigeria and some neighboring countries, while Mali has a large swath of the country occupied by militants. He urged Mr. Anadef to help get the problem sorted out, while also pledging the assistance of Nigeria to the special representative so that he would succeed in his assignment. Mr. Anadef said he was visiting shortly after his appointment because he recognized the crucial role of Nigeria in West Africa. The president has flagged off the construction of the Nigeria liquefied natural gas Train 7 project located in Benue, Rivers State. President Muhammadu Buhari, who joined the groundbreaking ceremony virtually, congratulated the NLNG and its shareholders for proving that a Nigerian company can operate a world-class business in safety, profitability and responsibility. President Buhari says the focus of his administration is to boost the development of the country's abundant gas resources, strengthen the gas value chain and develop the most needed infrastructure.
Mr. President, that the assurance we have from
the town of Finima in Benue Kingdom, Rivers State, hosts top echelon in the oil and gas industry. It's been almost 14 years since the last plant, Train 6, was added, and so it's with much delight that the managing director of NLNG speaks to the significance of the event.
Nigeria, indeed, has ridden on the back of oil for over 50 years, but with this Train 7 project, Nigeria is now set, and I believe it is now time to fly on the wings of gas.
As the single largest shareholder in the 100% Nigeria management-led entity, the GMD NNPC says the project aligns with the aspiration of the state oil company.
Mr. President, this is history being made. And secondly, Mr. President, doing this, it makes business sense. Your expectation is that we should have been in Train 12 today, that we're adding 35% of current capacity. It means that technically on per capita basis, we are not very far from Train 12.
With nostalgia and a sense of fulfillment, President Muhammadu Buhari does the honors.
I hereby urge the Board of Directors, management and staff of LNG, the host communities, to continue to collaborate to ensure completion and eventual commissioning of the Train 7 project safely and on time so that Train 8 can start.
This is immediately followed by the Minister of State for Petroleum, who has been leading the charge to execute the Decade of Gas project.
One of the remarkable benefits is that the nation's operational flare status has reduced drastically from 65% when Nigeria LNG came into operation to about 12% today.
Groundbreaking taking in 5 years' time.
On behalf of President Buhari, the Minister of State Petroleum leads all the dignitaries to the traditional groundbreaking ceremony.
For NLNG's Train 7 project.
For T7, the numbers look good, whether for financing, environmental performance in terms of reducing gas flare, to EPC consortium choice. The local content is significant, as 55% of engineering works will be in-country. Same as procurement, plus 100% of all installations and construction will happen here also. Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
The Dangote Fertilizer has commenced the production of fertilizer in its multi-billion-dollar plants in Lagos. The plant, which is the second largest in the world, will be contributing about 3 million tons of fertilizer to the country's agricultural sector. The Group Executive Director, Strategy, Capital Projects and Portfolio Development, Dangote Industries, Devkumar Edwin, says the plant has the capacity to meet any increase in the country's fertilizer consumption rate.
Trucks getting loaded at the Dangote Fertilizer plant in Lagos signals the beginning of operations in the $2 billion fertilizer plant. About 120 trucks are expected to convey over 4,000 tons of products daily from the plant, said to be the second largest in the world. This is good news according to the group's Executive Director, Strategy, Capital Project and Portfolio Development, Dev Kumar Edwin.
In fact, we started with textiles, moved to food industries, went into cement, and now we have come into oil and gas. It's a major project we have successfully completed in the oil and gas sector. And it's a large project. As you know, it's the second largest plant in the world. So that is success for the group.
While 20 kilograms per hectare consumption of fertilizer in the country is very low compared to international standard of 150 kilograms, the Abuja Convention proposed an increase to 50 kilograms per hectare for African countries. This will require more product consumption, which Dangote Fertilizer appears ready to provide.
So there is a good potential for Nigeria to consume the fertilizer and increase the yield and the quality of the produce, agricultural produce. So once we are able to provide the fertilizer to the agriculture community, the yield in the Nigeria will exponentially increase.
Beyond fertilizer production, the management says the 3 million tons fertilizer production plant also focuses on supporting the farmers to bring about employment and food security.
The farmer needs to know how much to apply, when to apply, and also, as Mr. Mathur was explaining, a soil mapping of the country is very, very important. So we can dose the fertilizer also with micronutrients to make up for the soil deficiencies.
At the moment, a 50 kg bag of fertilizer has risen to about 9,000 naira. This has impacted cost of production for farmers who look forward to noticeable changes with the coming on board of Dangote Fertilizer into the agriculture space.
Well, that's it from the nation's capital. It's back to you, Millicent, in Lagos.
Thank you, Gloria. The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, has test-driven a locally assembled electric car, Hyundai Kona, in Abuja. Professor Osinbajo drove the car while on exhibition tour of Made in Nigeria products at the opening ceremony of a 5-day Nigeria at 60 Expo held at the Eagle Square. The Vice President says he's excited at the innovation, adding that he's hopeful of a bright future for Nigeria. He says the car can be charged anywhere, as he commends the innovation. Meanwhile, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, explains that the event was aimed at showcasing what Nigeria can produce with local raw materials. What business is next? Here's Tenyola Shibuwale.
Banking, so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thanks a lot, Millicent. Welcome to Business News. The organised private sector is asking the federal government to carry out crucial economic reforms and show the political will in addressing the economic challenges facing the country. Addressing journalists at a briefing today on the state of the Nigerian economy, Chairman of the group, Mr. Taiwo Adeniyi, says focus should shift from development of primary sectors to technology-intensive opportunities in the manufacturing and services sectors.
The current challenges of high insecurity rate, kidnapping and other social vices could, to some extent, be attributed to the high unemployment rate. This data comes with serious social and economic consequences if the underlying issues are not quickly addressed. We believe that this situation should spur government at all levels to be more proactive, transparent, and focused on meeting the expectations of the citizens. More efforts must be channeled to fast-tracking economic revival, starting with support for real sector.
Meanwhile, the Central Bank of Nigeria says it's ready to provide the needed support in minting of the Gambia's Dalasi. Speaking during a courtesy visit by the Gambian delegation, the CBN Governor, Godwin Emefiele, says Nigeria has a lot of capacity in currency printing.
We have a lot of idle capacity, and I'm sure that instead of you going to Europe or to other countries, you would be able to benefit from our own ideas. And my colleagues will take you to our security printing facility. Our colleagues that came in from Liberia about 2 months ago were vaccinated by the kind of facilities we have at our Nigerian security printing and minting company, and I'm sure that you would also enjoy them. And indeed, I'm sure they will follow you back to Gambia to see how they can help, and also help to structure your economic order quantities and the rest of them, so that we can also be of assistance in printing your currency. And I can assure you that we can be extremely competitive.
Well, let's check in on the stock market now. The local equities market fails to sustain the positive momentum from last 2 weeks' trading sessions as investors turn to profit-taking. Ekaite Afia has the rest of today's trading activities at the NGX.
Good evening and welcome to the Stock Market Report. Contrary to analysts' expectations of a bull run, the local stock market begins the third trading week of June negative due to profit-taking by some investors as markets resume from the Democracy Day holiday. Well, in an unexpected move, the all-share index of listed equities fell back to the 38,000 lower level, down by 1.66%, indicating the impact of the renewed sell pressure which affected 26 equities. Now, among these decliners, the share price of Airtel, which is listed on the premium board of the NGX, was the hardest hit as it plunged by 10%. And this, of course, took the heaviest toll on the market's overall value. Now, let's take a look at the sectoral performance. Across the 5 major counters of the listed equities, only the consumer goods sector ended the day in the red due to the losses in the share price of its key components such as flour mills, Okomu Oil, International Breweries, and UACN. Meanwhile, the shares of Access Bank emerged as the highest contributor to nearly 300,000 total units of shares traded in more than 4,400 transactions, while share price of CWG made a comeback to lead 18 other gainers for Tuesday's session. Well, that's all for the Stock Market Report. I'm Ekaite Afia. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Ekaite. Well, it's also a negative close in the U.S. as stocks slip from their record highs as investors await key decisions from the Federal Reserve's monetary policy meeting. Well, here are some of Tuesday's closing numbers for other global markets. And that's Business News tonight. It's back to Millicent for the rest of the news at 10.
Banking, so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thank you, Teniola. More than 600,000 people have died from COVID-19 complications in the United States as doubts linger over President Joe Biden's goal of getting 70% of U.S. adults vaccinated by the 4th of July. About 43% of the U.S. population, 144 million Americans, are fully vaccinated, so says the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. We'll hear Simon Pusey with more international news and around the world in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. China has accused NATO of slandering its peaceful development after alliance leaders warned about systemic challenges coming from Beijing. NATO said that China's actions, including expanding its nuclear arsenal, threatened rules-based international order. It was the first time NATO had placed China at the centre of its agenda. In its response, Beijing said its defence policy was defensive in nature and urged NATO to devote more of its energy to promoting dialogue. The chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has called for a full investigation into suspected crimes against humanity during the Philippines' deadly war on drugs. The ICC opened a preliminary probe into the drugs war back in 2018. Thousands of civilians are known to have died under the campaign. National data acknowledges more than 6,000 deaths, but international rights groups have long warned the figure could be far higher. A spokesperson for President Duterte said his government would not cooperate with any ICC investigation. A trade deal between the UK and Australia has been agreed between Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his counterpart, Scott Morrison.
I'm not going to exaggerate the overall increase in our respective GDPs that will flow from this, but I think it's more important politically and symbolically. We're opening up.
The agreement is the first trade deal to be built from scratch since the UK left the EU. It is seen as an important step towards the UK joining a wider Asia-Pacific free trade agreement. Downing Street said the new pact meant British products such as cars, Scotch whisky, biscuits and ceramics would be cheaper to sell to Australia. A French court has ordered IKEA to pay a fine of €1 million after the Swedish furniture chain was found guilty of spying on staff in France. The French subsidiary was found to have used private detectives and police officers to collect private data on staff. The illegal surveillance covered about 400 people. The former CEO of IKEA in France, Jean-Louis Bellot, was given a 2-year suspended jail term and a €50,000 fine. At least 15 people have been killed in a suicide bombing at an army camp in the Somali capital Mogadishu. Officials at the hospital confirmed the dead were killed in an attack at a checkpoint outside the General Degeban military training camp. A reporter at the scene said the bomber, posing as a military trainee, walked into the army camp in the Wadajar district and detonated explosives strapped to his waist. There was no immediate claim of responsibility. Thousands of treasure seekers have flocked to a village in South Africa, believing the area could contain diamonds. The rush comes after a man dug up a crystal-like stone in an open field and put out word of the discovery. The stones haven't been analysed by geological experts yet, and authorities have asked people on site to leave so that a proper investigation can be carried out. The provincial government has described this activity as illegal mining. A massive industrial fire at a chemical plant in Illinois will be allowed to burn for days in order to avoid having chemically polluted water from firefighting efforts run off into a nearby river. The plant, which manufactures oil-based lubricants, sits 300 meters from the Rock River, and there is a concern that the water used to put out the massive blaze could run off into that river. Crews have stopped their water suppression efforts and will allow the blaze to consume the chemicals at the site over what they believe will take several days. The Danish midfielder, who suffered cardiac arrest on Saturday, has posted a picture saying he is fine under the circumstances. Christian Eriksen collapsed during the game with Finland and had to be resuscitated on the pitch. Eriksen has since thanked fans from around the world for their support. He says he still has to go through some examinations at the hospital, but that he feels okay. The Inter Milan playmaker is now in a stable condition in a hospital in Copenhagen. And finally, China has built a Mars camp in Lenghu town in the northwest Qinghai province to simulate the environmental conditions of Mars. The Red Rock area has been dubbed the most Martian place on Earth, as experts claimed that the landscape, rocks, sand and even the temperatures are similar to those on the Red Planet. Launched in 2019, the base is designed for space enthusiasts and professionals to get a better understanding of life on Mars. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the channel studios in Lagos.
Thank you, Simon. And it's now to some sports news with Ayotunde Balogun.
Many thanks, Millicent. Nigeria has crashed out of this year's African Women Handball Nations Cup after losing 44-14 to the host Cameroon in the quarter-final played at the Yaoundé Multi-Sports Complex. The Cameroonians completely dominated the game from the first half, which they won 26-3, and then finished off their Nigerian counterpart in the second half 18-11. This means Nigeria will not be at the World Cup in Spain in December. In football, Cristiano Ronaldo has become the all-time top scorer in the history of the European Championship with a brace in Portugal's opening game against Hungary in Budapest. Ronaldo's goals, which sealed victory for the title holders, were his 11th in the championship, spread across 5 tournaments going back to 2004. He surpasses the previous mark of 9 set by France legend Michel Platini. In the other game, France defeated Germany courtesy of an own goal by Mats Hummels. UEFA has opened a disciplinary inquiry into Austria's Marko Arnautovic for insulting North Macedonian players in Sunday's Euro Championship game. Arnautovic scored Austria's third goal in a 3-1 win in Bucharest and then launched into an ill-tempered celebration. The Macedonian Football Federation says the outburst was directed at Leeds United midfielder Ekcan Alioski, who is of Albanian origin. He has issued a wide-ranging apology, but that was not enough to stop UEFA from appointing an ethics and disciplinary inspector to look into the incident. The Euro Championship semi-finals and final will be played in front of 40,000 fans at Wembley as part of a series of a new pilot event in England. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced a 4-week delay in England to the full lifting of COVID-19 restrictions, which were due to end on June the 21st because of a surge in infections caused by the Delta variant. England's group games have already been included on the government's extended events research program and will continue to be played in front of crowds of 22,500. And Wimbledon Championships will be allowed to operate at 50% capacity during the 2 weeks of the tournament, which was cancelled last year owing to COVID restrictions. The women's final on July the 10th and men's showpiece the following day will be watched by a full 15,000 crowd. Wimbledon has welcomed the developments and said it will announce further details regarding spectator capacity and COVID protocols for the championships. And that's a wrap on sports news. Is back to you, Millicent.
Thank you, Tunde. And the main news again. Judges and lawyers were absent today as courts reopened in the country following the suspension of a 2-month-old strike by the Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria. Also today, the Chief of Army Staff, Major General Farouk Yahya, affirmed that there is renewed synergy among security agencies in tackling insurgency. He was screened by the House of Representatives. And U.S. COVID-19 death toll today surpassed 600,000. That's according to data from Johns Hopkins University Coronavirus Resource Center. That's the news at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker. Stay safe.